Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Solution Room, where we interview preeminent figures from our community who are activists, business people, and those who really challenge us to make polar shifts in our behaviour so that we can advance to where we desire to be. Everybody saw Black Panther this year, and there is a utopia where we desire to be, which we are nowhere near. What this show is about is identifying all of those people that are going to get us gradually closer to where we need to be, at least. So today, I'd like to welcome Esther Stanford Kose to the show, who's going to speak about the reparations movement, about the principles of the reparations movement, and the fact that many of us don't actually realize that it isn't just economic, in that the term reparations actually means repair, which is a holistic vision for where we need to take both Africans and Africa. Esther, welcome to the show.
Thank you, it's good to be here. The movement in the UK
Powerful.
is, I would say, the most threatening movement globally.
Yeah.
And the reason why, and it's not just about us being born here, it's because this is the relics of empire,
Absolutely.
British Empire. So it means there are communities living within the United Kingdom that come from all over the world and all those countries that Britain has colonised. But we have settled here for
Absolutely.
whatever reason. Many came as economic migrants or what have you. Many have been fleeing persecution because they are still criminalised and tormented in their own home countries. So we have the movement in the UK has always been Pan-Africanist, Pan-Caribbean, internationalist, global.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been all of those four things. That's what makes us. And the visions, the ideas, the platforms, the programs, the strategies, the tactics are far more expansive than what you find with many of our movements, even the resistance that we're seeing in Africa, that a lot of the time gets localized in terms of country struggles, ethnic community struggles or nationality struggles, and so forth. The movement in the Caribbean is being framed as a Caribbean movement.
Yeah.
In North America, one of the main reparations formulations, I mean, there are many other tendencies, but one of the most well-known ones is NCOBRA, the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. But a lot of the movements, although there have been other tendencies that are quite global, they have kind of located or limited their organising, their strategizing to prioritising, if you like, where they live. And there are arguments and tendencies even within the international social movement for African reparations and the contingent of us that are based here that will say, yeah, we should just focus on us here. It's not about our people anywhere else. Because they don't understand geopolitics.
Absolutely.
Okay? They don't understand that we are a global people and that we are scattered and we reside and we lay claim to, four corners of the earth. So we have this global nation in formation that is over 350 million strong. That is a power base.
Absolutely.
If we were to tap into that. And so the vision from the movement based in the UK, the iSmart based in the UK, is expansive because we're able to learn from the struggles, the successes, even the failures, because we like to talk a lot about success. We don't talk a lot about what went wrong.
Where the greatest lessons are learned.
What are the lessons that we can learn from Black Power movement at its height in the 60s and 70s, other movements, okay? Because movements wane, they come and they go, they get resurrected, you know, they get renewed and regenerated.
But we've got to look at why they dissipate.
Exactly.
And we've also got to look at the influence of media through movies, music, and that transition of cultural values that always dissipates those movements when they're at a peak.
Right. So in relation to the messaging and the propaganda, the media around this march, the British establishment, the British state, the empire, because, you know, people talk about American empire, but where do all the presidents come? Where do they come? This is the motherland for them, for Europeans.
And the city of
in terms of global white supremacy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as you said, the city of London.
Coordinates
financial centre.
Those economic ties.
That's right. Geopolitical economic ties.
So you touched on something very important. In that everybody wants to localise it, not realising that your boat stop isn't the problem.
Exactly.
To take the EU, it was never a cultural union. Italians, when they're putting their olive oil drizzle on pizza, look down on English people eating their £1 Iceland pizza.
And vice versa.
So it's not cultural. They are economic unions. And I think one of the things that's held us back is that for anybody else, you're not rediscovering America. But when it comes to us, we don't see that a purely economic union empowers all of us because it creates the trade, it creates the arguments based on your interests as opposed to arguments that can conflate the issue, as I've seen even you speaking in the past with fellow Africans who are speaking on the interests of Europeans, not realising that they're betraying their own interests and the possibility of actually striking at the heart of the beast and receiving any form of reparations, because as you said, it is a phase and tiered execution. So speak to me a little bit more about the 5-point plan.
Okay, well, the 5 principles of reparations,
absolutely.
Because let's not make an assumption that people who might be watching this, that they have the same understanding or knowledge around reparations or even ideas. So essentially, in the movement, we use 2 definitions for reparations. We talk about a conceptual definition, which is the framework, the big picture stuff. We refer to what is known as the Chinwezu. Professor Chinwezu, Nigerian public intellectual, who's produced so much knowledge and consciousness about our story as African people. So his definition, and I'll paraphrase it, is basically that reparations is about repair, but holistic repairs. In every field of people activity, every field of our human endeavour, economic, social, political, cultural, educational, technological, interpersonal repair, self-repair, repairs in the way that we see ourselves, repairs in how we relate to each other, and also how we relate to our environment and other peoples of the planet Earth. So that's the conceptual definition. And one of the things that Chinwezu says is that more important than any monies to be received and any lands to be recovered is the opportunity that the reparations campaign offers for the rehabilitation of Black people, he says, by Black people, for Black people. Opportunities for the rehabilitation of our minds. Our mindsets, our material conditions, our family traditions, our spiritual traditions, but first and foremost for the rehabilitation of our mind.
Which is the part that can be delivered by us.
That's right.
Now, I see that Europeans do grasp that bit a little more, because they'll be convinced by that, not so much by the land being returned, not so much from economic reparations, but they like that part.
Right.
However, they like it with their mouths, because everything with their actual action resists it, including any of our attempts to create schools within the UK based on their money, which is our taxation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the second definition around the five, you was asking about the five principles, is under UN, United Nations international law. Okay? Now, this is not the UN, because a lot of people don't, when you mention the UN, they just think someone's white, normally, sitting up there and making up these things. No. These UN principles on a right to a remedy and reparations were forged as a result of people's struggles. People's struggles to transform self, community, and nation. And therefore, you kind of create the avenues within what is considered law, international law, by convention, and by what people who are in positions of power say, these are the minimum standards that we must govern ourselves by, as if you like, right-thinking individuals and peoples and nations. So under the UN principles, which was codified in 2005, they refer to restitution, compensation, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-repetition. And I'll just say a bit more about all of those. Now, in the African struggle, people of African heritage, whether people self-define as African or not, okay? We're talking about peoples who can claim that origin to our homeland, our motherland, Africa, no matter who we have become or how we self-define now.
Absolutely.
All right? And the restitution being the first principle around that is really, I guess it speaks to all the measures that you put in place to kind of put a people or a group back in a position they would have been in but for. But for. And there's a whole list of the but fors. So we use the term maangamizi in the movement, Kiswahili term, African Holocaust, and it refers to a multitude of violations of our rights, crimes, sins, injuries against the person, family, community, nation, environment, our ecosystem, okay? So common words that get used are enslavement, colonialism, neo-colonialism, genocide, terrorism, racism, Afrophobic racism.
Absolutely.
Because we can't just talk about racism. We have to recognise Afrophobia as a specific
we're very
form.
Unique people with a very unique experience.
And Afrophobia as the specific form of anti-black racism. Because there is a notion that there are some communities who define as black but are not self-defining as African.
Yes,
so, for instance, Aboriginal peoples of Australia, many of them they call themselves black. The men, anyway, say black fellas. They're black fellas. And they identify with our people's struggle as well. But they're also asserting an Aboriginal identity. Yeah. And there are many also people who are African or of African heritage who are also asserting an Aboriginal or a Moorish or an indigenous identity as well. So it's very complex.
Which is part of the challenge.
Yes.
And I find any time that I use African, people will refer to Afrikaners. But because it is a common identifier that we all recognise, you must start somewhere.
Absolutely, and I think the debate is still going on the origins of that term, and I'm not really going to go into that history because my argument to that, argument to that is that as long as there is a place on this earth that many people identify as Africa, geopolitically, we are connecting ourselves to that land.
Yes.
And the right not only to belong, but to benefit from the resources of our homeland. Because right now they are being misappropriated to benefit other nations and to further wars of terror and destabilization, especially in this era of Brexit. So going back to the 5 points, restitution putting us back in a position we would have been in. So imagine if the Maangamizi never occurred. Who would we be if we had all of our people, all of our skilled people, all of our artisans, our technologists, our scientists, our healers, our educators,
and no
our griots? No, exactly. Who would we be if we had